This is Dr. Zhana, and today I would like to talk to you about a question that I was asked one day at a reception by someone I don't know who came up to me and said, "What do you think about a post-gender world?" And I was like, whoa, there's so much there to unpack, and it's really not exactly a simple question, but I'd like to try and break it down. Okay, first of all, what the heck is a post-gender world, you might ask? Well, the way I understand it, it's a world in which gender as a concept and as a useful social category has been eliminated. In other words, people still walk around with different sets of genitals, but gender roles and identities have become so obsolete that there will be no group differences between those with typically male and typically female genitals in terms of their psychological traits, in terms of their behaviors, in terms of anything. So for example, those with penises will no longer be more aggressive on average than those with vaginas. Everybody, therefore, will be largely androgynous, a mix of typically female and typically male characteristics and interests and tendencies and professional interests and personality traits and all of those things that psychologically we think as different between men and women. That's one thing about this post-gender world, or what that post-gender world might mean. And then the other thing that it might mean is that gender identities as a man or a woman or something else, a trans person or some other form of gender identity, that will no longer exist. That people won't see themselves anymore as gendered humans and won't be seen by other people as gendered humans either. So as people walk around, you'll see some people as short and some people as tall. You might see some people as white and some people as black. So you may see old and young and so on. So you may see people as different other social categories or biological categories, but that gender identities will no longer be relevant. So the first question here is, okay, is such a post-gender world possible? And my answer is, I don't think so. At least not unless you use some pretty horrific methods. Let me unpack why. So here's why. Okay. In order to eliminate gender identity and all psychological gender differences from this world, we would need to eliminate all factors that influence the two genders to be different, both the sociocultural factors and the biological factors. So let's say we can completely eliminate all social factors imposed on men and women to look, act, feel, and identify differently. We slowly build toward a society that allows people to express themselves in whatever way they feel authentic, regardless of their genitals. And we start valuing both typically female and typically male traits and behaviors equally. We fully acknowledge the non-binary nature of gender and sex for some people, and we fully integrate all non-binary all non-binary gender identities in the society, giving them all the rights and protections afforded to men and women. Let's say we can do all that, and for the record, I'm all for it. I think we absolutely should do all of these things. But then we would also need to eliminate all the influences on gender that come from the fact that there are objective reproductive differences between the two genders, right? With women bearing virtually all of the burden of pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding. And as a result, all these influences that come from millions of years of evolution that the two different genders have faced because of these different basic reproductive differences. So let's say advancements in reproductive technology do allow us to completely eliminate these gender differences in reproduction. So we get to a point in our society where we can all reproduce very successfully without burdening women and men any differently. So we can all conceive by in vitro fertilization rather than by good old sex, having sex, the good old way. Let's say all embryos can be carried to term in incubators instead of wombs. All newborns can be fed formula that is perfectly replicated from their mother's milk. It's not just, standard formula you buy at the store. We take the mother's DNA and what her milk would be, and we create this perfect perfect formula for that baby based on that mother, right? All of this is possible, not right now quite, but in the future. Let's say that this is not that sci-fi at all. Will it erase gender differences and identities? I still don't think so. Because humans are a species that reproduces sexually, and we have been reproducing sexually as opposed to, the asexual reproduction way of some algae or bacteria. And we've been doing this for millennia. And because of that, we're going to keep having that urge to find mates, find sexual mates, find mates that we're going to reproduce with. And as long as we allow human beings to seek these mates, the biological differences are going to persist, at least somewhat. Not as strongly as they did when you did have these very serious differences in how we treat men and women socially, and also the biological differences stemming from reproductive differences. But still, you're going to have some of these gendered interactions because people are going to be pairing up or trying to pair up sexually. So the only way I could see a post-gender world happening is if, this artificial baby-making process that I just described is not only allowed or doesn't only exist for people to use if they want to, but we actually make that obligatory. We enforce that upon the entire world without choice. Then B, we prohibit all sorts of partnered sexual behavior of any kind. Any kind of partnered sexual behavior is prohibited. And then, because some people are going to have a really hard time suppressing those needs, in fact, many people will have a relatively hard time, more or less, suppressing those needs. So then we have to prevent from reproducing those people who have a hard time suppressing these needs. So we want to selectively breed out the very sexual people and only allow reproduction to happen among the somewhat less sexual people. And we kind of slowly take the human race into an asexual direction, and that will allow this ungendering, if you will. And then you also would have to have this go on for a very, very, very long time, like a really, really long time, so that evolution can start to act on kind of taking out some of these gendered traits and identities. So I don't know about you, but to me, that kind of world sounds like one of the worst dystopias, negative utopias that I could possibly imagine. So I wouldn't like to live in that world. I also don't think we would get there, but I guess the answer to, do I think it's possible? I guess it is possible, but it would be very, very difficult to do. And I think it would be completely unethical to do. It would be horrible to do that to the world. Okay, but let's say we've invented a technology that could turn all people completely androgynous in their personality traits, interests, tendencies, and it can wipe the notion of gender identity as a man, woman, or any other gender from people's minds. So let's say we have a shot, we have an injection, or we have a beam or something that you can use on yourself or on other people to turn them completely genderless. And you can do that without having to go through this awful dystopia that I just described. Would such a post-gender world be desirable? That's, I guess, the second question in the what do you think of a post-gender world? Would this be desirable? Well, I think as a technology that would be available as personal choice, I absolutely think that we should have this. If we can have it and if people want it. So I strongly believe in the right of people to do whatever the heck they want with and to their own bodies. As adults, if you're an adult, you can do whatever you want with yourself, according to me. And I hate laws that prohibit people from doing that. But so if such a technology existed, then I would happily make it available to anyone who wanted to use it on themselves to make themselves more androgynous in personality or ungender their sense of self, their identity. And I think at that point, society should absolutely do everything in our power to accept such individuals, to provide them with all the rights and protections that we would afford to any other class of citizen, right? Now, as a society-wide policy where you would use this technology on each and every person in the world, that I am completely not okay with, right? And that would mean forcing upon people something that they don't necessarily want. Right? And I am very much against anything that is done to people without their consent, except things that are necessary to do to prevent them doing something non-consensual to other people. But right, I would not think this is a good idea to force people, to take that pill or that shot or whatever. But let's say, to take this event to its final point, let's say that everybody in the world chose out of their own volition, without coercion, because they thought that this would be a great idea to have a post-gender world. And so they chose voluntarily to use that technology on themselves once they reached age of consent. Do I think that such a post-gender society would be desirable, would be the ideal society that we should strive towards? I don't necessarily think so. I know that for a lot of people, the gender as a category is something that they struggle with, especially in a world where we don't value the two genders equally, and then certainly don't value other genders. And it can be very difficult to have a gender that you either don't think is valued as much as it should be, or you have these inconsistencies or discrepancies between how you see yourself and how others see you, and how others think that you should behave based on your genitals, right? So I understand that that's an issue, but I don't think having a genderless society or a post-gender society would be a very fun society to live in. Like, gendered personality traits and gender identities are one of the many things that contribute to the diversity of human beings. And I like that diversity. Like, it makes life a lot more interesting. I think I don't want to live in a world that doesn't have genders. I want to live in a world that does have genders. And I think we should be striving, a much better thing to be striving towards. It's not in a post-gender world. I think it's a world where we can have a multitude of gender identities, including those who identify as not gendered, right? And one where we can completely and fully accept all of those multitudes of gender identities and don't consider any of them superior to any other ones. And also a society where we don't expect or force any particular kind of behavior, interest, or desire from people with a certain type of genitals or a certain type of gender identities. So I think a world where we eliminate social roles and expectations and where we're forcing people to wear pink or not wear pink, or cry or not cry, or choose to do math or whatever. Like, I think we should definitely strive towards allowing everybody to self-determine in how they want to look and act and feel and behave. But I don't think we should be striving, or it would be better if we lived in a society where there were no gender differences in any psychological traits, or where there were no gender identities. So that's a very long, I think, to some extent, but hopefully makes sense answer to that question of what I think about a post-gender world. What do you think about that? Let me know in the comments. Thanks.